René De Vries is a geoscientist and an entrepreneur. His specialization is in soil and groundwater contamination and infrastructure development. He was an environmental consultant for 35 years, but recently he ran for office in Canada. And I'd like to thank you for stopping by today, René.
Well, thanks for the invite, Daniel. Great to speak with great minds.
Oh,
Uh,
that's very kind. You're going to be disappointed though. But okay, so let's start there. I mean, you were an environmental consultant and you went to Canada. And so what brought you to Canada? You said that you were from the Netherlands originally.
yeah, it's a very small country, so people are very quickly inclined to discover the larger world when you grow up in the Netherlands. They've done that for centuries, I guess, and I was no exception. I made it to Canada because I thought I was always attracted to North America. Actually, if you look at my picture, there I was just Muhammad Ali was one of my childhood heroes. I would get up at 9 o'clock in the morning. No, at 4 o'clock in the morning as a 9-year-old, watching the fights from Las Vegas because the time difference that would go on TV, and that was my first attraction to North America: the energy and the, um, the everything going on there, so to speak. And fairly quickly, when I had a chance in my university studies to come to North America, I did. It was as part of a study tour, a co-op term for my university period, and I took the advantage to study the environmental management of the Great Lakes. Lots to study there, lots of water, and at the time there were some controversies here in Canada with Dow Chemicals and
Mhm.
TCE on the bottom of the St. Clair River, and I
Mhm.
thought that would be interesting to study, and so
There
that's
were
what I
there
did.
were feet and legs and severed hands floating up in Canada's like Great Lakes as well at one point. So,
Well, that was on the West Coast. Yeah, no, that yeah,
okay.
no, that those kind of things I wasn't too that interested in. I wasn't interested in studying chemicals in the water. So
Mhm.
that's what I did, and yeah, I it's a whole different culture. The space that people have in North America is often not appreciated when you grow up here. It has an effect on mental, I would say, mental clarity or mental mindset. In
Mhm.
Europe, where I grew up, space very limited. Also, people are on top of each other, and I do find it actually limits people's thinking even because you boxed in quickly and you're fighting quicker with your neighbors or with the people you grew up with. And here, there's more space, and automatically, I find room for creativity. That's one
Mhm.
thing that I think North America very much has. One reason why I think it has been successful also economically, but the space itself and the amount of resources, water, oil, and everything else is definitely helpful in establishing a prosperous life, and that's what many people have done here in North America. I don't think people may have stopped appreciating why they came here to in the first place, but that was one of my attractions. And yeah, I stayed because I wound up marrying here, starting a family, and yeah,
You came
the
for
rest.
Muhammad Ali and stayed for the woman. You
That's
know?
right.
But I wanted to make a point just really quickly regarding space. I had a friend, Paul von Altrock by name. If you're out there, Paul, hi. And he was an architect and he's from Germany and he was visiting me in the United States. And this was years ago. I was a kid. And he was just saying, like, you don't appreciate the space. Like my uncle's house, where he went and met me, had a 2 yard or 2 acre front yard. And he was just like, wow. I mean, in Germany, you just open up the door and there's just a sidewalk right there. There's no
Yeah, exactly.
space. You guys don't really appreciate this. And now where I'm leading with this is um, they were talking about why the wages in the United States were so much higher than in Europe. This was in the 1700s. Thomas Malthus discusses it. So did Hadrian Chang mentions it. Karl
Hmm,
Marx even mentions it, that the
really?
United States, yeah, they had 2 to 3 times the wages of Europe. And what they decided was in Europe, they had an aristocracy. And so land was power. And so the aristocrats kind of sucked up all the land. All the peasants were kind of crowded together. And in the United States, where we had no aristocracy initially, we have one now. We didn't have an aristocracy. Land was cheap, and how Malthus explains it was in Europe, where the aristocrats weren't creative people. When the Industrial Revolution happened, the only way that they could make money and jump on that thing was not to innovate, not to create factories, but they did have one thing: they had the land. So what they did was they jacked up the prices outside of market values, and they created all this artificial inflation. It got so bad that in England it cost a week's wages to buy a single loaf of bread. Starvation was rampant because of this oligarchical class. In the United States, by contrast, or Canada, there was vast swaths of empty land, so it wasn't bought up because we had no aristocracy, and because of that, the cost to make a factory, to have it on cheap land, basically they had extra money for the what Henry George calls the wage fund, right? So they could afford to hire people at higher wages, and they needed people because they had a shortage of people.
Right.
So they went to immigrants, and they went to people like the Netherlands, and they're like, hey, come over, work in this factory, we'll pay you 2 to 3 times the wages. And that all happened because we didn't have an aristocracy. And Marx even called for that. He was an admirer, ironically, of the United States in that thing, and he said, Europe should be more like America and get rid of their aristocracy, because the aristocracy is causing all this, this harm.
Well, that was you're right. It seems to have disappeared, but the meritocracy that North America seemed to exemplify for people like me 30 years ago was one of the reasons why I wanted to come here. You had a decent fighting chance, although it's not, Netherlands was a good place to grow up as well. Looking back, the opportunities were there, and especially with the globalist economy. Even now, I work for a large global engineering firm. You could work wherever you wanted. So in that sense, they've been, those chances have equalized. But for entrepreneurs, I came to Canada with this mindset of, I'm going to start this company and just build it up. In the end, I wound up running my own company and then joining another larger company. So I lived my dreams in a way. My Canadian my Canadian dream of coming to a new land and going and occupying that space and doing something creative with it, and enjoying the whole process. That's the dream, right? That's why many people come here, and you have nobody to fight but yourself. That's a big difference compared to what I saw in the old country, right, where you often have preconceived limits
it's designed to keep you poor.
Designed to keep you poor, right? Although they want to import that now, right? The Klaus Schwab mentality of life. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna hit that. I'm gonna use that as a jumping off point, because I wanted to talk about, let's talk about the growth of an aristocracy, or an oligarchy, really, in Canada, and how that's driving the real estate values up to extraordinary levels. I saw 2 different videos with migrants. One was a migrant from the Caribbean, and he said that his biggest regret was moving to Canada.
What is the biggest thing you regret in life?
I regret in life? I regret coming to Canada, because if I had stayed in the Caribbean, I would have been way better. I came to Canada, I worked, I don't know, maybe 20 years. I had to go back to my country. 7 years, living here for 20 years, 7 years in my country, give me enough money to buy 2 properties in Canada cash. 7 years, and 20 years you're just paying rent and nothing. It tells me Canada is just a trap. I own property, and it's hard for me. So imagine people who come from different countries for the first year, and you're wasting your time. You're going to stress out, you're going to go crazy, and you're going to die in less than 10 years, when in your country, which would have been harder, you live for another 40, 50 years. No matter how bad it is in your country, it's only going to get worse here. I'm telling you the truth. I travel the world and live a good life, all kind of stuff. The idea of Canada is to get out of Canada, not get in. And I've realized that between America and Canada, the people who are living back in their country are living better than us who are living over here.
He said,
if I stayed, that one too.
Yeah, he said, if I stayed in Jamaica, I could have 2 houses by now. In Canada, I just work and work and work, and all the taxes are taken from me, and I'm just in a box, and so they're basically trapped in these rising real estate price, this, and it's basically because of a new aristocracy, whether it's a corporate aristocracy, whether it's individuals, Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, BlackRock, they're coming in, buying all the units. And another method that they're using to keep real estate values artificially high is migration. They'll go to, students in China, students in Indonesia, whatever, and say, oh, come over here. And, and with that increased pressure, demographic pressure, it keeps the real estate values artificially high, and it prices like Canadians and Americans and everybody else out of those markets. And they're suffering because of this new kind of, oligarchical class driving these.
Yeah, but who is importing those people? Because at this point, it's like both political parties, doesn't matter whether it's red or blue, they are supporting this increased migration, immigration policy. And it's sort of like, yeah, the more the merrier, because then you have bigger growth, the numbers are bigger, and therefore supposedly it's good for everybody. But there seems to have something has gone lost in that certain standards are not maintained. Those previous standards of the meritocracy are not being maintained. It's sort of only like you're saying, it's a smaller group of people that are benefiting from this. Is this the political class and their supporters? Is that who are only benefiting from this new economy? What's going on there? What is we as Canadians? That's there's a little joke I'll tell you in the meantime. The Dutch are the Germans without the anger, and the Canadians are the Americans without the money. So we always look with envy to our southern border, because our southern neighbors, because they seem to have all the money. And but we now also realize, that's more and more concentrated in an oligarchic class, and 60% of the bottom of that is fighting for the scraps. And even though there's still this appearance of meritocracy, is it really like that? And if you do studies there, I think the whole issue of social mobility has gone out the window, right? Like you have almost that stagnation in desperation and lower class in just as much in North America as you had it in Europe. And so that's something that is
we're watching the same
that could
process.
be the big lie, right? And then immigrants like that, like you see, they start to realize that after 20 years, and they say, like, this is ridiculous. And it is ridiculous. In Toronto, Vancouver, it's impossible to buy a house at this point for somebody starting out. So they might be able to start out a little box.
Condominium. There was a book called The End of Scarcity, and it was written by an economist, and she was talking about how the real reason the economy is going down is because our money is debt, right? So our money is not based on an asset. It used to be based on an asset. It used to be based on gold or some kind of asset like that. So it's a plus. Now money is only created when someone takes a loan out. And so it's we really are using anti-money. And if you paid back all the debt, all the money would disappear from the system. Every time the government prints up treasuries, new money is created. Every time you take out a bank loan, new money is created. Now here's the point she was making, is that the system needs people to be in debt, right? So if somebody else pays off $100, somebody else loses $100 because that was an asset, whatever that debt was, with a credit card. And so she said that in my country, in the United States, and it's the same in Canada, that the people are so maxed out on debt that the system is starting to feel like a deflationary crisis. And so the system needs more people in debt. And since it's maxed out the Americans or the Canadians, it's saying, hey, Chinese come, Vietnamese come, live in debt. And it spurs the economy. More money comes into the system as long as they're debt slaves. So and the Sumerians had a word, I think it was amargi, I think, and it meant freedom, but it translates as to be without debt. So if you're in debt, you're not really free. And so she was complaining.
No, you're a slave to somebody.
That the whole system is based on this. And that's the migration is being driven by those two elements, that the financial sector needs more debt slaves, and that the real estate markets need more people to pump it up. And so that confluence is seeing both alleged parties on the left and the right, because on the left, it's just that they want to, that's their road to power. And on the right, they like the cheap labor. They like the growth of that oligarchical class. They're benefiting from it. The rest of us, not so much so.
Well, as a father, and that's why I entered politics, and might be one of the questions. Why are you doing that?
Yep,
because it's a turbulent time, to say the least, and people might want to run away from that kind of kerfuffle, and politicians are not very popular at the moment. I would say that often on disrepute because of the situation we're in. But yeah, as a father, I'm saying I'm concerned, and for my kids and my grandkids, and where this whole thing is going, I don't like it. I could see that they don't have the freedoms that I had when I came here, and they won't have the opportunities that I had when I came here. And I want to do what I can to help that along, and work with like-minded people, which I know many of them still exist, who want to do the same thing for their kids and their grandkids, to create the atmosphere that we had when we came here, and safeguard the freedoms that led to the prosperity and the meritocracy of North America. And that's really why I'm making. Now, I had that long-term ambition, and I always said at the end of my business career, that's where I want to move, and that's exactly what I'm doing. So that's kind of interesting that it's just at a time. Actually, I was for first time candidate in 2021 for the PPC, when we were in the middle of the lockdowns, and yeah, that almost felt like I was a freedom fighter, right? Like I was told often the case. Yeah, and I did also go to Ottawa with the truckers. We were there. And I feel like I'm feeling proud of that. We were there taking a stand for Canada. Canada, we stand on guard for thee. We were holding the line for freedom, and very proud of what the truckers achieved also internationally, because we attracted attention and we motivated other movements in other worlds. Again, last week I was in Ottawa meeting Christine Anderson and Eva Vlaardingenbroek. She said, yeah, it's the Dutch farmers took after the Canadian truckers. They saw, oh, well, we can do it that way, make a stand, use our equipment, and
they won.
Now they've translated that to political power as well. Very interesting to see that, and how that moves, and how different countries motivate each other. And we'll see where it goes. It's going to be a long-term. I call it now a 10-year adventure to flatten the tyranny.
Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
The Dutch thing, I just wanted to, for the viewers here, I just want to make them aware that the Dutch lead the world in chip making technology. They have a company called ASML, and ASML is like 10 years ahead of everybody else.
They make the machines that make the chips, right?
Exactly. And so anyway, so the Biden administration was in a quiet trade war with China, a stealth trade war. And so they blockaded off technologies that would help China with manufacturing, which includes those chips. And so they got the Netherlands to blockade China and Japan. And so China retaliated by cutting off rare earth elements that you would need for chip making. And right after that happened, all of a sudden you saw a bunch of Western countries, including the Netherlands, looking to source minerals domestically. Whereas before they could, get them from China, suddenly they can't. And all of a sudden, like in my country, they were sending out geologists to, farmers in South Dakota and other places. And if the geologist came back and said, hey, there's lithium under this land, they would use eminent domain to get rid of the farmers. And so people were wondering what was happening in the Netherlands. Why are they shutting down all these farms? And they were wondering, is this about starving the people? And there's probably an element of that. But I think deeper, no pun intended, is that they're basically looking at the minerals. And if you happen to have minerals under your land, the government's going to seize it. So that's a horrible thing going on.
That's a perspective I never saw. Well, Holland is not big on mining. It's so small, but maybe there was talk about that land is needed for houses and for solar panels and windmills. So
a country that's been dredged from the sea, like large portions of it have grown. Yeah, the technology that small little corner of Europe, all of modernity. And I think I came to your attention because you saw me talking about how the whole modern world was made in the Netherlands. The stock exchange was invented in the Netherlands. Yeah. The joint stock company, the first
original deep state originated there. Yeah.
The Industrial Revolution started not in England. England stole. They did industrial espionage to steal the textile machines from the Netherlands, and they even poached some of the engineers and technicians to be able to recreate it in England, and they kind of stole it. They had the first, kind of Dutch East India Company. They were amazing. Like all these changes out of the Netherlands, and still coming out of the Netherlands. I'm
a proud Dutch Canadian.
Yeah, very, very impressive. Yep. But I wanted to bring this to your attention as we were talking about, the rise of an oligarchy in places like Canada, the unpopularity of the so-called leaders that are there, that are
Yes.
they really don't seem to have too much power. I mean, even Trudeau's own brother said that he suspected that they were kind of blackmailing him, and for other things that we won't go into.
Kyle
But
Kemper, right? He lives in Florida. Yeah, I follow him on Twitter too. Yeah,
yeah, and
he's
so
actually a PPC supporter, Kyle Kemper. Yeah.
oh, excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
And so so he's saying he's basically, Trudeau is basically a puppet of the World Economic Forum. And I wanted to bring to your attention a friend of mine named Vicky Davis. She sent me this book, or she told me about it, called Merchants of Peace, and it's from 1934, and it's an interesting document because it talks about the rise of what would become the World Economic Forum. It was the Chamber of Commerce, and it was created, I never knew this, in Switzerland. And so they wanted to make a businessman's international, basically copying the Communist International, but they were going to call it a businessman's international, and they were going to create a global government structure outside of nation states. And they explicitly say this. They talk about, like, the Nobel Prize, he says, was basically used to spur the idea of globalism, internationalism. And so he mentions in there that one of the delegates, his name was Gustav Stessner, I think. Gustav Strassmann was his name. And he was the German representative, and he wanted Germany to be a nation state. He wanted, he didn't see why Germany should take a hit for all the surrounding nations. This was around like 1910. And so the other people said, "Ooh, this German upstart isn't getting it." So they basically, World War I happens to take Germany down economically, because Germany wanted to act independently as a nation state, and they said going forward,
England couldn't really handle that, right?
Yeah. And so it was very reminiscent, just to go back to our thing about the aristocrats, the oligarchs in England in 1200. The kings are always at war with the aristocrats, always. A king might be richer than one aristocrat or two or three, but he's not richer than all of them. And they usually have, when they pool their resources together, their soldiers, their money, they're richer than the king. So in 1200, they took King John out into the forest and put a knife up to his throat. And told him,
exactly. You were talking about that.
To sign Magna Carta. You're going to sign over all of your power to the oligarchs, and now we're going to have the House of Lords. The king will not do the laws, the aristocrats will do the laws, and we will become our rule of law maker. And so they take over, and so you see the same, the microcosm, as below, so above. And so you see on the larger scale, nation states, whenever a nation state became an economic powerhouse like Germany, it got surrounded by the other countries that got together and then took it down in a war. And then you look at
they couldn't handle the nationalism. What were they worried about?
Well, Germany at that time, H.G. Wells in 1899 in a book called Anticipations. So as early as 1899, he said that England's eventually going to have to take Germany down, because England had the old Roman Empire colonial slave-based model. And you may have heard me talk about this before, but like, if you wanted rubber in the 19th century, you would get it from one of these colonies in Southeast Asia. It would take 9 months to get to you. It would be inferior. They had rubber tree plants. And then Germany had the idea, hey, let's make synthetic rubber. Let's make it for pennies on the dollar, a factory, no slaves. And so people started buying the superior German synthetic rubber. The English were like, they're taking our market share. We got to take them down. And so that's what they were afraid of, the German economic miracle, that they were using science and technology and not slaves and colonies. They were against the globalist kind of model of, kind of the supply chain, the global supply chain that we still use with slaves. So that became problematic to them. They did not want a country that was so economically prosperous that it could make its own decisions. That would be a threat to them. So they basically got together and they took it down. And then they said, okay, once we take, just like King John, once we take you down, we're going to put a knife up to your throat, metaphorically, and you're going to sign legislation that gives us power. Just like Magna Carta. And so in the United States, you see the economic takedown of the United States, and they're putting a knife up to the throat of the United States. We do not want a country so powerful that it can be independent of us. We're going to take you down, and you're going to sign these global treaties that hand over power to the World Health Organization, or hand over power to the world. So we're watching the same phenomenon of the king versus the aristocrats. Yeah, except on a national geopolitical
How
level.
do the multinationals play into that? Because are they the merchants of the new age?
The Merchants of Peace. That's the name of the book, right? 1934. Yeah, I mean, like,
Well, I work for a company that has in its mission that improvement of quality of life for everyone. So, yeah,
sounds nice.
We like to bring that to people, and with for sure a profit motive, but that we also have a mission that likes to improve people's life quality. So
yeah, I mean, well, I wanted to hit this as well with you because you're beyond left and right. You transcend that, right? And so
yes,
you believe in freedom.
I see politics right now, good versus evil.
Very good. That's much more accurate. But you have certain qualities that someone might attribute to the classical historical 20th century left, in the sense that you believe in the environment. You're a big proponent of, kind of responsibly, like not polluting, corporations not polluting. And so you reminded me of Donella Meadows. Donella Meadows was one of the bad guys from, if you're a conservative, she was part of the Club of Rome, and she wrote this great book called Thinking in Systems that I made my kids read. Wonderful, wonderful book. But as a woman of the left, she has a section in her book about migration. And she died, like, I think in the 90s. So it wasn't the problem that it is now. But she said that there's a point, so if an initial migrant comes, there's still resources for that migrant. Okay, if 2 come, if 10 come, if, once it gets to large numbers of hundreds of thousands, of millions, suddenly there's resource depletion. Suddenly the quality of life for everyone else starts going down. And so two of the things that she said as a woman of the left was that mass migration is bad. And secondly, she said, to get companies not to pollute, we need private property, which is something the left is, communism, no private property, everything in common,
Oh, wow.
So she said that. She said they're less likely to pollute. Like, if you have to, like she said, if the corporation is downstream and they basically dump, and the other people get the bad aspects of it, they're going to keep doing it. She said if you force them to dump on their own campus, they're less likely to do that. Right. So she said that
they'll take care of their own property. Right.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Well, right now, as PPC, we're the only party that's advocating less immigration, or to at least control the numbers. Like, we don't want it to be the open door policy that all the other parties are espousing. And that's, with the mind of, let's control our quality of life, because we had a good quality of life, and that's being diluted right now. And we need to control. It's more, I think, out of a desire of control, and try to, how do we maintain the bar high and not get dragged into something undesirable? And so, interesting. And I don't see it as a left and right issue either. But I guess you can always make it that way. I more and more see that left and right as just a classic that wasn't it invented by King Louis XV, that he came up with the left and the right. I see it as a classical divide and conquer move. Like, okay, you guys debate a bit, and in the meantime, I'll continue to rule over you.
Yeah, the CIA calls that a strategy of tensions, when you get people to fight. And so, like, tyrants historically have used like, not just left and right, but ethnic rivalries, right? They do not want a cohesive populace, because that cohesive populace might rise up against the tyrant. So they like having kind of people at each other's throats, and it's kind of ruled by chaos and deception. And that's not a good long-term strategy. It's good in the short term for that oligarch, for that tyrant, but long term, if they
will turn against you. As you see now in the Middle East, the Arabs have now united. I would say, you have Iran and Saudi Arabia, and many now said, okay, well, we don't want this anyway. We don't want this conflict, and we don't want you to continue your project as you started it in 1948. This is potentially lethal for expansionists, like the colonial project that the Brits started right at that point. And and so it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of this now.
Well, I mean, you hit on something. Although, if you notice that none of those Muslim countries are taking migrants.
No, that's right. Nobody wants that.
Yeah. And it's like, because it doesn't make any sense, for the reason, like, if I could give you, just to assess you, the ethos that you're giving off is that quality of life. like both in terms of the environment or in terms of kind of natural
Yeah, and I
resources?
have nothing against entrepreneurship and making money. So you could say, well,
Yeah,
that's a typical right-wing
it's
thing.
quality of
No,
life.
no, that's also quality of life. You do need your money to have a good quality of life. So yeah, that's worth fighting for, and that's prosperity, and that also will bring peace, in my opinion. So
Mhm.
I think I'm starting to think that this whole invention of strategy of tension has been an ongoing preoccupation of the ruling elites that try to hold on, the neo-Malthusians that
Yeah.
try to figure out how do we keep to ourselves, how do we not get the riffraff to eat from our cheese and keep them out.
That sounds like a Dutch phrase translated.
Yeah,
You eat
yeah,
from
that's
our
right.
cheese.
Don't eat our cheese.
By the way, the term Yankee, I saw the etymology, like for
Oh, you saw that, Jan Kees.
Jan Kees. Yeah, so John
Yeah.
Cheese is what it means. John Cheese. Because every country, just for the viewers, every country has like an analog. Today we use Uncle Sam as the symbol of America. England used John Bull. So every country would have a different person, but initially it was John Cheese, Jan Kees, for Yankee.
Jan Kaas, yeah.
Yeah, I'm mispronouncing it. I'm doing Spanish queso. Quesos, okay.
Quesos. Okay, right.
The
Well,
Netherlands, Spain owned the Netherlands, so there you go. At one point.
Yeah, well, this is one thing that I wanted to talk to you about. In this progression of how states develop, and I have a big admiration for the United States, how they got away from the oligarchs of old and the English in 1776. The Dutch did that in
88.
Yeah, 15. Well, they started an 80-year war in what was it, 1548, and is that a model that can be repeated? Because I feel Canada is ready for to say goodbye to the UK. And I'm, in fact, if you look at polls, like this is just opinion polls, majority of the Canadians don't want to be under the wings of King Charles, and we're about to start printing money, I think, with his face on it, and you hear opposition against it, and I believe this could be one of those things that even as a political movement you could embrace. Our leader Maxime Bernier has been outspoken about it. He would be in favor, especially with Prince Charles being a full-fledged neo-Malthusian and embracing the World Economic Forum principles of depopulation.
Yeah, look, wasn't it his dad who said that? He hoped that when he dies, he can come back as a virus.
Yeah,
and kill
a deadly virus.
people.
Yeah, so he can do something about world population. Yeah, what a guy. No, and he's just embraced that, and he's fully on board with all these environmental. I'm not against any environmental management practices that create a better quality of life and keeps toxins out of people's lives. Okay, so let's be sure about that. That's what I've been doing for 35 years. But to use that as a hammer, especially the whole climate, controversially I would call it a hoax, the whole climate hoax, to use that to advance political goals is it's just gross, and as a scientist, I'm vehemently against that. Like this has tainted our science, and no, this is not something that we should allow these people to occupy our profession and taint it. They've done that for political games, and it's obvious to me. But I don't agree with their policy. So goodbye. I prefer if Canada could say, you know what? That's what the Dutch did to the Spanish king. Here's our divorce certificate. Goodbye. We're done with you, and we have now our new country. I don't know. Do you think that would be something exciting, or is that not something that would move the needle at all?
Canada is so wealthy. Canada has all the same resources that the United States has. Look at Alberta with the oil and everything. I mean, Alberta's even thinking of defecting,
separating from Canada. Yeah, it's the strategy of tension between Trudeau and Alberta. Yeah, it's serious at the moment.
Yeah, Canada may break apart of itself. I mean, there was a book called The Sovereign Individual in 1997 by Lord William Rees-Mogg, and he was the financial advisor of Lord Rothschild. He's passed on since, but he was talking about how in the 18th and 19th and 20th centuries, there was a period of consolidation where you get a bunch of small little princedoms and municipalities, and they kind of, city-states, and then they coalesce into modern Italy. They coalesce into modern Germany in the 1860s. They coalesce into these large states. And he said that now, because of technology, we're going to go through a period of decentralization for the first time in centuries. And so we're going to probably go back to city-state models. And he said that Canada is likely to break apart. Quebec is going to break apart, and then you're going to have the Anglophone part of Canada. The United States would probably break down. England would probably break down back into Scotland, Wales, England,
Really?
Ireland.
Well, it would make sense.
Spain is really 4 different countries.
Do you know the money flows in Canada? Because people complain about how much money Israel gets from the United States. Quebec, as a province, got more money than Israel got since 1954 from the rest of Canada.
Well, it kind of tells you, though, that it kind of suggests that they're under occupation, that they're not really the same country, and it's bribing them to not revolt, And
that's right. And once people start pinching pennies, and start to look at it, okay, how the money flows really going, and that's one of the problems that Alberta has with Quebec and the rest of Canada is, well, we're paying into this and we're not getting anything out of it. So no, thank you very much. We're going to go off on our own. At that point, you're going to see things breaking apart. It's quite possible, And
I was thinking about, like, along those lines of the the decentralization, the decentralizing nature of technology, and like, what does that mean, for small regional places? Some places, like, for instance, leading up, you mentioned aid to Israel. Basically, what's actually happening, just for the viewers, not for you, René, but for the viewers, when we started giving aid to Egypt and Israel and Nigeria, all these countries all around the world, what was actually happening was they were building out the global supply chains. And so they were basically, you would see these memes of, this is Singapore in 1990 and it looks like salt flats, and this is Singapore in 2020 and it looks like Manhattan. Well, that money came from the West. That came from, like, the United States. Largely, they stole $50 trillion from the taxpayers. They built ports in all these countries. They built rail. They built, bridges, all the stuff to basically create this global supply chain. And they strip mined us. And Canada is kind of going through a similar process where its natural resources, it's a very wealthy country, and it's being strip mined. And look recently in the news, King Charles was caught when people die, and they don't have an heir or something, and the money goes, it's going to him. He's in bet. So do you think he's not doing that to Canadians? Betcha he is.
Yes, well, there's that my little idea of separating from the crown, I think, has a problem, because much of Canada's land is owned by the crown. So you automatically have a I would say the king would say, well, fine, but you owe me $20 trillion for all the money, or for all the land that you're now going to want, right? So automatic sort of tension point.
Why not just say it? Just declare that it's null and void. I mean, I think. Well, just like Trudeau, I think that King Charles is a puppet, because if he steps out of line, they'll say, "Hey, England's a republic now. We don't need him." And suddenly the press will,
With all wars being banker wars, what will happen if I would have my way, and thinking along those lines. Okay, we will declare a free Canadian republic, and we are declaring all the contracts with the international banking conglomerates and with the big pharma null and void. Now you have everybody's attention. That would be something. I don't know.
Then they would launch a coalition of nations against you.
To liberate Canada from its new dictators. Yes.
Yeah, that would be the line.
That would be the predictable response, I guess. Yeah.
So what do you think? You mentioned something about the Liberal Party falling out of favor, and rumors of a Canadian federal spring election in 2024. So what do you think?
Actually, our leader sent out an email recently to all party members that we need to that there's rumors in Ottawa about that. Everywhere you go, Trudeau is despised. All the discontent of the population has found definitely sort of a lightning rod with him, and they think that, okay, well, as long as he moves on, then things will improve, and we already have the blue version of the World Economic Forum playing lined up under Pierre Poilievre. So in my opinion, that's not it's just a change of color with a similar program. But the Conservative Party has convinced that no, this will be much better, and therefore that might be a bit of a change of pace where people will say, yeah, that this is something that could make a difference for Canada, and I think it's quite at this point. The only person that is standing in the way of that is Trudeau. He will have to do his walk in the snow, so to speak. His father was in a similar position. Sorry, my light here is going down. But 40 years ago, he was also, I understand, had similar problems with Western Canada, and that was also in the end pushed out. And it's going to be up to him to make that decision. Will he be able to do that? And the election then will be called. It's at the moment they're in this minority government, or the Liberals are with the support of the NDP, and they can continue till 25 officially. My thinking is that they would want to hold on as long as possible. But if it has been made so impossible for them to get anything done, or the 80% of the population is completely discontent with the entire situation, and who knows what that leads to? I don't know. Will discontent lead to people just saying, okay, well, we're done with this, we're not going to pay taxes anymore? I don't think it's going to go to that extreme, but that's the mood where people are at, or like you said, Alberta might want to break up the country. They already said we're thinking of our own pension plan in Alberta, or like when you get to that point where drastic steps are taken, at that point maybe people within his own party will say, okay, you know what, for the good of the country, it's better if you move on. And then they'll probably try to shuttle somebody more moderate in there that tries to keep the whole thing together, because that's in the end, I think, still what people will strive to. Well, we don't want to break up our country over this.
I think they're probably going to try to install an Indian. Have you noticed that?
They did that in Manitoba. New premier is, yes.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, like, if you look at the Prime Minister of Ireland is now an Indian, a gay Indian. The Prime Minister of Scotland, the Prime Minister of England, and then you look in the United States with Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley.
Well, he's a great. I like his policies.
One of the things, like, somebody had like a list of all of the CEOs of all the top companies, like Google and Apple, and it was like Indian. And so I'm starting to suspect. I was reading a book. Let me state it this way. It was done by a German scholar, and it was called Scars of Independence. I think his name was Holger Hook. And he was talking about the violence of the American Revolution that people forget. It gets swept under the rug. And the King of England is a finite place. It doesn't have endless people. So they would use, famously, Hessian soldiers from Germany would fight, as mercenaries against the Americans, but also things that aren't talked about. And Holger Hook mentions that the British would humiliate the Americans by having Africans from the Caribbean beating people in the public square in Boston.
The turning point had come in 1768, when the British government sent several thousand troops to Boston to police the revenue system. For the Crown to show its military might in Boston in the manner it had previously done in Ireland or Scotland was a provocative move. In a town of 15,000 or 16,000, there now were as many imperial soldiers as there were white male residents above the age of 16. It did not help that among the troops were numerous Irish, and when the Afro-Caribbean drummers who served in the British regiments carried out disciplinary floggings of white soldiers on the common, it offended Bostonians' sense of the social and racial order. Reading further in the participants' accounts, we find that American patriots, who tended to remain silent about the violence they meted out to Loyalists, dwelled with passionate indignation on the cruelty that they themselves suffered at the hands of the barbarous British and their Loyalist, Native American, and German auxiliaries. A British tendency to turn a blind eye to an unprecedented defeat is also partly to blame. Britain's imperial loss occurred despite putting 1 in every 7 or 8 eligible men under arms, and recruiting large auxiliary forces in Germany to fight alongside white loyalists as well as Native Americans and former slaves.
And this infuriated the Americans, and they also paid Native Americans to kill and scalp Americans, and they were working for the British Crown. And this is even mentioned in the
what year was this? This was after the American Revolution?
No, this was before the American Revolution, in the lead up to it. And it's mentioned in the Declaration of Independence of them using Native Americans, against. So the British Empire has a habit of globalist behavior. Like even in the 1700s, they weren't loyal to their own people. They would use foreign people to come in who didn't have sympathy for the people, because if they used a native born person, they'd be afraid that they would care about the people. So they would bring in foreigners. And so I'm looking at the foreigners brought into Ireland, Scotland, England, Canada, and I'm looking at them going, hey, you have two choices, Republicans. You could have Nikki Haley, Indian, or Vivek Ramaswamy, Indian. You could have an Indian or an Indian. And I'm like looking at it's looking very similar to the tactics that they used back in, the globalism of the 1700s.
In Ottawa, at the end of the breakup of the Freedom Convoy, there was also lots of speculation that UN troops were being flown in to break up the demonstration. And that's classical, right? That always happens. In fact, I remember those same discussions about China when they broke up the demonstration there, the student demonstration. They brought in Mongolian groups, soldiers, because they didn't mind driving the tanks over the students there. So that's classical. Well, when you know people, it's a lot harder to kill them, right? So
So I'm worried. I'm like the fact that they're putting in place what look like prison wardens from other kind of societies kind of suggests that they're planning on doing something extreme, and that they're planning on doing something, that they don't want the people doing it to have sympathy for, which implies something very, very dark is in the offing. So let's hope that that's just wrong. Let's just hope it's a coincidence that all these CEOs and all these new heads of state that probably nobody actually voted for. Let's hope it's a coincidence.
This is why it's, in my opinion, important that the lines between rulers and people stay as short as possible. Everybody in society needs to bubble up to actually take control of ruling of the place, so that you care about what you have, and you care about the people. If you get a distance between an oligarchy and the slaves, they don't really care about us, as Michael Jackson would sing. And so that needs to always be attacked, because if you have that distance, then you could have situations like that where you have a class moving in that just does whatever they want for their overlords that are maybe even in another country, trying to get their supply chain in order again.
In your country, exactly. But I mean, what we're watching is something that is very, I mean, this is classical. I mean, like if you go to England, the Norman invasion, so you had these French-speaking Normans, they take over and they don't feel a kinship with the Saxons, who they consider trash. To this day, all of the Saxon words for things are the dirty words. If you want to use the clean word, use the Latin word, I mean, like, I don't want to get a strike, but the Latin would be vagina, the Saxon would be the dirty word. And so to this day, all the Saxonisms are the bad words, the uncouth. It's just uncouth, and all the Latin is the classy, because that it basically was a diversity state where you had the ruling class. Like if you read the letters of Anne Boleyn to her father, they're in French. So they were quite apart from and they treated them like dirt. And same thing with the Spaniards in Mexico. The Spaniards show up. To this day, there's a small Spanish ruling elite, and there's a massive Aztec population. 95% of the country is Native American. 5% of the country is European, and they do not feel a kinship. They do not feel like, hey, these are my people. However, you go to Japan, where the ruler is the same ethnicity as the populace, he looks out at a crowd and he's like, hey, that person looks like my aunt, or that guy looks like my brother, or that person over there looks like my uncle Stu, and so he's far less likely to be abusive. And that's one of the inherent problems in diversity states. They don't have, in Greece, they called it philia, like a brotherly love for the other people. When you're a conquering elite, you tend to treat the people
Others
over
are
whom you're
slaves.
ruling badly. Yeah, they're just serfs, they're slaves. And right now, that's as they're preaching to us that, oh, the diversity state, diversity. Well, what is diversity? And I kind of alluded to this before. Like, they're ruling by disintegration. Diversity means disintegration, right? There's integration where everybody comes together, and then there's disintegration where you're not an American, you're an African American. You're not an American, you're a Hungarian or whatever. And they break up the identity, and that's good for the tyrant in the short term, but it's like pouring acid on something, kind of like paper. Modern paper, we get it white by putting acid in it. The problem with it is that it erodes within a couple years. We have manuscripts from the 1300s with no acid in it, and still fine, still legible.
Right.
And so you pouring acid in the society, long term, that disintegration will tend to break. So you asked before, do I think that the countries that as they currently exist will probably go on, or will they break up? I think the way that they're ruling, it kind of implies that they're going to break up eventually.
And that strife is baked in the cake. Maybe they want it. Sometimes I wonder too, because they need to keep a job for the military-industrial complex, right? So they they have somewhere to throw their bombs. Yeah, that's
well, they
one.
also said, okay,
that's two of my big things that I see in all this that have developed. And I go back to Eisenhower. He warned us for that in his farewell speech, 61. We need to have an alert citizenship to agitate against what he was the first one, I think, that came up with this military industrial complex. And out of that also now we have big pharma grown these conglomerates where certain military or certain industries that have become so successful have become very powerful in their own right, and now start to dictate the entire system, or wag the dog, so to speak, right? The military industrial complex is creating its enemies in order to keep itself in business, and things like that. Any well-thinking citizen would dismiss that and say, no, we take control of this. This is not what we want. We set this out in policy, and for the prosperity and wealth and quality of life of our kids and our grandkids, this is how we're going to do it. And that's gone out of the window. I think you're right with if people are too disjointed in different groups, and it could be related to nationality or or economic power,
different subgroups,
different subgroups, then they don't have that care, right? They just very siloed and focused on their own power and money. And power and money, that's usually the two magic ingredients what people are running after. So,
well, you mentioned military industrial complex, and then you mentioned big pharma. In this country, after the last health crisis, let's call it, so we don't get a strike, the evidence is coming out that it was run by DARPA. That the whole thing, the pharmaceutical companies were the third down in the chain of command. It was the military industrial complex.
I know, it's very scary, actually. That's the first time I experienced that kind of level of coercion. That's the totalitarian fascist state, right? Like, everything comes together to push one directive. That's not where we want to go. So maybe we want to split them up a bit more. Who knows?
Well, I was looking too. As an American, we always our reflexive attitude toward Canadians was that they were the most polite people in the world, that they were friendly, they were kind. We always got a steady stream of Canadian comedians, Jim Carrey, John Candy, just all this talent, we always liked Canadians. And there seemed to be, especially with Trudeau, right? All of a sudden it turns more into an authoritarian state that we don't recognize. And then secondly, there's these demoralization campaigns that were telling Canadians that they're inherently bad, they're evil. Look at these Indians and the mass graves and the bodies. And then they do ground penetrating radar. Wait, there are no mass graves. But you're told, so suddenly the nicest people in the world are being told they're the evilest people in the world. You're illegitimate, you're bad, evil. And I'm like looking at them do this to this kind, sweet, it's the most bizarre thing.
It's psychologically abused everybody almost, right? Like, we were so good and now we're actually evil. And it's a way of demoralizing people, maybe as a way of control, who knows? But to collapse you.
Collapse Canada. But anyway, okay, well, let's end it there. We're coming out to the thing. René, how can people find your work? René De Vries, people, look him up.
Yes, well, I'm on Twitter, my fourth account after having been stricken off, or Big Pharma trying to censor me. I'm now under Aafko De Vries. That's AAFKO DEVRIES. That's my Twitter account. That's probably my my best way to get a hold of me. I am also on Facebook and Instagram. And I'll be with the PPC. I'll be also affiliated on websites, so that you can find me there. I think through a quick Google you can find me there. But yeah, I'll be engaging. I'll try to be a good citizen and fight evil. So nice to have found like-minded souls in the States. And I still believe in humanity that way. And let's keep on engaging. So thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Renee. I'll talk to you soon. I'd like to take a moment to thank you for watching. If you'd like to stay updated, hit the like and subscribe buttons. But more importantly, if you don't want to see me reduced to shilling my old merch, such as the Daniel Natal in action figure, where you can see Daniel engaging in an action as he watches TV, or engaging in an action as he surfs the internet, or failed products like the Daniel Natal Pez dispenser, or the even more ill-considered Daniel Natal urinal cake, think about supporting the show by buying one of my books. For instance, you can buy my book, Actionable Ethics. The link is in the description below.